and thank everyone. I'll remind council members to turn on the mic like I just did because I forgot to do it at the beginning. If anyone here has a cell phone, please turn them off. We don't want any buzzing, beeping, or dinging while we have our council meeting. So Mapleton has a significant rise in COVID-19 cases since last week. This is disappointing, but was expected to happen at some point. Mapleton currently has the highest rate of active cases in all of the Wellington-Dufferin-Guelph public health area, with 138.1 cases per 100,000 population. That is more than double than any other municipality in the Wellington-Dufferin-Guelph catchment area. Some people are pointing fingers at our Mennonite population for this current outbreak, but that is not what the facts are revealing. We have active cases in the Community Christian School, the Maryborough Public School, and the Drayton Heights School. An outbreak was expected in Mapleton because of our low vaccination rate. While Wellington County as a whole hovers around 80% fully vaccinated, Mapleton is at the least vaccinated municipality in the county with under 70% fully vaccinated. So we urge all residents, not just for you, but for the health of everyone in our community, to please get your vaccine. This vaccine has been proven to boost your immunity and reduce the impact of COVID-19, while also helping to slow the spread to those still unable to get the vaccine and to those others that are immunocompromised. Please continue to follow public health protocols and wear your mask inside public spaces and whenever physical distancing is not possible. We have worked with public health and will host a pop-up clinic in Drayton this Thursday, November 11th at the PMD Community Hall from 5 p.m. until 8 p.m. Other clinics are also coming up at the Moorfield Community Center on November 23rd from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. and December 16th from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m. There are also clinics throughout the county all the time if one of those dates do not work for you. Thank you for cooperation and keeping Mapleton residents safe. I'm going to remind council that we are live streamed tonight, and as well as we are going to be taping this. So say hi to everyone because everyone's watching right now. All of Mapleton. You can smile if you want there, Councilor Craven. I'm smiling right now, can you tell? Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we have confirmation of minutes. Resolution here moved by Councillor Paul Douglas and seconded by Councillor Ottens that the minutes of the Township of Mapleton Special Council meeting held on October 19th, 2021 be confirmed as circulated in the agenda package. Any questions, comments on that? All in favor? That's carried. Moving on to the next one. Item 4.2, moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Douglas, that the minutes of the Township of Mapleton Council meeting held on October 26, 2021 be confirmed as circulated in the agenda package. Any questions or comments on that? All those in favor? That's carried. We don't have any matters arising from the minutes. We do have the Planning Act matters. So we'll move into the Planning Act, item 6.1. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act to hear comments from the public and agencies and to give consideration to an application ZBA 2021-14 for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The subject lands are located at 7997 8th line. The purpose and effect of this application is to rezone a portion of the lands to allow a single family dwelling. We will now receive information from the clerk regarding statutory requirements. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, sir. Through you. Staff can confirm all agencies were provided with the required notice and proper postings were completed on October 21st. The planning report prepared by Mapleton's Linda Redmond was received and included in the agenda package. Wellington County Planner Jessica Rahim's comments were received and included in the agenda package. A planning and development meeting was held on October 20th, attended by our planner Linda Redmond, CBO Patty Wright, Director of Public Works Sam Matina, and Fire Chief Rick Richardson. There were no concerns or objections. And finally, no comments were received from ratepayers.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We will now hear from our planner, Linda Redmond. Linda?
Thank you, Mayor. There we go. Am I on? Good, okay. So this application is before council today because the lands currently have a natural environment zoning designation that covers the entire property. This designation was put in place in 2010 when Mapleton did their environmental mapping and brought it into the actual bylaw. So prior to that, the lot did exist without a natural environment designation and was capable of putting a house on. So what has happened is the GRCA, who regulates that area, has looked further at the lands and have actually assessed where the actual hazard line lies, where the floodplain actually exists on the property, and was able to adjust the hazard line so that now there is a buildable area outside of the natural environment to accommodate a house. So the zoning would have to be changed from natural environment to agriculture, where the house is going to go. So this zone amendment will achieve that. We have no concerns with it.
Thank you, Linda. Does the owner, Ronald Fletcher, have any comments or further explanation? Mr. Fletcher? Use the podium, just press the button there for the mic on.
Not really. I'm really just here if council has any questions, Mr. Mayor. And once again, I think the application speaks for itself. I was sad that it changed in 2010. It was a bad year, I suppose, for me to go to Australia to teach for a year. But anyhow, it impacted the entire property. But yeah, I'm just really here to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. I'm sure you had a good time in Australia teaching. Are there any comments from those attending? Please indicate so and state your name and address for the record. We will first hear from those in support of the zoning amendment, and then we will hear a presentation from those opposed. The applicant may respond to any concerns. Are there anybody here wishing to oppose this application? Anybody here in support of the application? Any questions from members of council then? Councillor Ottens?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Davidson. Just a quick question. Where would the driveway come from on here, off the 8th line or off the county road?
I suppose I can answer that question. There is an existing driveway that has been on the property for considerable time coming off the 8th, and that has been designated again as the area that will be maintained as the driveway. So it will be pretty much existing. It will be built up a little bit from what it is, but maybe about 6 inches or so, but it will be the same driveway.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question maybe for the planner, Redmond. What exact, so rookie question, full disclosure, what, when the Conservation Authority revisits a boundary, do you know the criteria, what goes into it? Is it like elevation of the land versus the natural environment, or how do they come about a reinterpretation?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, in this instance, because it's a hazard land, it represents flooding. So they go out and they actually reevaluate where they do modeling where the actual flooding will occur, and they're able to further define where that boundary, where the flooding will go to. So it is an elevation.
Thank you. Further questions? This public meeting is now concluded. Thank you for attending this public meeting. I do have a recommendation here. Moved by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Ottens, that the planning report regarding ZBA 2021-14 located at Part Lot 1, Concession 9, 7997, 8th line, R. Fletcher, be received for information. Any further questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We do have, the next one here is a consent application. Consent application summary for land division file B 89-21. The resolution here is moved by Councilor Otten, second by Councilor Douglas, that the Township of Mapleton Council support consent application B 89-21 as presented for lands described as part lot 15, concession 7, with the following conditions: that the owner satisfy all the requirements of the local municipality, financial and otherwise, for the proper and orderly development of the subject lands, including but not limited to the outstanding taxes. That payment be made of the fee of $266 for a letter of clearance. That a copy of the deposited reference plan be submitted to the township. And further, that council authorizes the planning and development coordinator to file with the secretary treasurer of the Planning and Land Division Committee at the County of Wellington a letter of clearance of these conditions on completion of the same. Planner Redmond, any comments on this application?
Through you, Mayor, this is a minor boundary adjustment to capture the geothermal heating loop that's currently on the property there that's going to be merging. So it maintains a 2-acre parcel, which is perfectly acceptable for these rural residential lots. Staff have no concerns.
Thank you. Questions from council then? All right. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 7, delegations. Today we have item 7.1. We have a delegation with Joyce Sloat. Joyce, welcome. And I would remind you, Joyce, that you have 10 minutes for your presentation. The microphone is there. Just push the red button when you're ready to go.
Good evening, council and all present. For years, I've chosen to care for myself through holistic modalities, eating wholesome food, avoiding additives and preservatives, drinking non-chlorinated, non-fluoridated water. I have allergies, chemical sensitivities, and severe reactions to things like antibiotics. Vaccine exemptions for COVID have changed without any explanation as to why or by whom. Present exemptions are unattainable for pre-existing conditions. This council has mandated that to qualify for vaccine passport, a VP, one must inject an experimental drug directly into a body, regardless of the fact that an adverse reaction is very real. The Ontario Public Health Association treats only disease. Vaccine companies are exempt from liabilities due to any injury. My immune system and well-being is my responsibility alone. For me, the mandated vaccine passports end result is assault. Forcing people to have an injection without informed consent is against the Nuremberg Code. It states in part, the voluntary consent of a human subject is absolutely essential. Choice without the element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion. I believe that all these elements are present in some form with request for vaccine passport to enter township facilities. Nazi concentration camp survivors have requested an investigation into what they believe to be a medical experiment. Question 1 for council. What prompted council to mandate vaccine passport that prevents some residents from entering township facilities? An Ontario constitutional lawyers complainants have sued the Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph Health Department, Province of Ontario, the CBC, and others. I contacted Randy Pettipies, our MPP, and Greg Davison, our Wellington County representative, for an explanation. Mr. Pettipies responded with, as MPP, I cannot comment on legal matters. The Justice Center for Constitutional Law has also taken the provincial government to court for the overreach with vaccine mandates. Many cases are also moving through the courts. Question 2, who brought forth the threat of a $10 million fine should this mandate not be imposed? Who is paying and at what cost for added expenses with advertising, implementation, PPE, and the policing of the VPs? Informed consent is the hallmark of all medical procedures. Dr. R. Malone, the inventor of mRNA technology, states that this injection without informed consent violates bioethic laws. Question 3, is council confident that informed consent is being adhered to within your VP mandate to allow entry into township facilities? Whoop. These injections contain harmful ingredients such as PEG, aluminum, graphene oxide, and the genetic substance known as mRNA or spike proteins. This genetic material brings the statutes of Canada into play regarding genetic tests. It's insidious that unvaccinated people are being segregated. The injection does not stop the virus spread to others and does not prevent vaccination from being infected from SARS-CoV-2. Vaccines are not the way out. Pharmaceutical companies are not responsible for any death or injury from vaccines. In Australia, vaccine compensation laws are being drawn to protect workers. Question 4, for those that enter into township facilities, will Mapleton Township provide compensation for damages incurred from possible injuries or death from this injection? World-renowned virologists, scientists, and doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers are warning us as to the present dangers of the injection through the research, knowledge, and observation. They're all being silenced. Dr. Bridle, Associate Professor of Viral Immunology in the Department of Pathobiology at the University of Guelph, writes, due to the risk-benefit profile of this injection, he demands mandates be rescinded to avoid placing more people at risk, especially Canada's youth. Dr. R. Killian, former ER doctor at Grey Bruce Health Centre, has quit or been fired after bringing the facts to the forefront that 80% of her ER patients were double vaccinated. Dr. Jessica Rose, PhD, a Canadian computational and molecular biologist and immunologist, has taken vaccine adverse events reporting system data and charted the results. It's known as VARS. VARS is a national early warning system to detect possible safety problems in US licensed vaccines. The deaths and injuries reported after COVID vaccines are staggering. These amazing minds have lost jobs, income, reputations have been centered, and their life work destroyed. They've been harassed, threatened, called quacks and anti-vaxxers. These brave souls are in the trenches and have firsthand knowledge of what is truly taking place, and we need to hear them. Fact checkers hired by social media platforms have made certain that a Google search will not produce their truth. Long before COVID, there'd been a shortage of healthcare providers in hospitals, long-term care, and home care, along with frontline emergency personnel. This pandemic has now compounded these shortages with the firing of those that are refusing the vaccine to protect their own health and rights and freedoms. Provincial governments have recently postponed these mandates within the healthcare facilities. The risk of harm must not exceed the benefit. Vaccine efficacy is waning, and now 2 shots and yearly boosters are now mandated for one to be considered fully vaccinated. Shots that do not protect against future variants of the virus. Adverse reactions with this injection are growing. Canadian Dr. Jessica Rose sounded the alarm that the VARS system is overloaded and data not being updated. As of October 11th, VARS reports injuries reached 578,000. Updated just recently, they're now at 856,000. The means number for the past 10 years for adverse events from vaccines was 40,000. For those of us over 70, there's a 94 rate of recovery from the virus, with benefits of an immune system defense against variants for years to come, if not my lifetime. The risk of death from COVID is no greater than most seasonal flus. A child's risk of vaccine injury is much greater than risk to harm from getting the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The benefit is a lifelong immunity to variants with a robust immune system. In mid-October, our own public health released a report indicating that more than 100 Ontario youth have been sent to hospital for vaccine-related heart problems. Nazi camp survivors believe injections of this experimental drug is a deliberate murder of children. Isolation, segregation, the inability to breathe because of masks are all causing emotional and physical damage in our children. They need to be in school to play with friends and participate in social activities at local arenas and in township facilities. On the Mapleton website, you indicate the COVID vaccine is effective, prevents serious outcomes, and reduces spread. This is no longer the consensus in the medical and scientific world, as you will see from all the references included in this presentation. The officer of the Privacy Commission of Canada states that vaccine passports must be decommissioned if at any time it's determined they're not necessary, effective, or proportionate response to address the public health purpose. Question 5, will council take the steps to rescind the decision to impose vaccine passports and enable all residents to enter township facilities unimpeded? Many believe that power and greed is behind this pandemic. This pandemic began with PCR tests proven faulty, along with the flawed death statistic information obtained from erroneous computer modeling from the Imperial College in the UK. False information was dictated to worldwide appointed health associates to spread the propaganda. Organizations that are to protect us, one being the CDC, has admitted to manipulating statistics. R. Brown, University of Waterloo, published a paper making it clear the information provided by vaccine companies regarding the efficacy of vaccines is misleading. Fear was systematically dispensed worldwide to all levels of government. These untruths are disguised as facts or talking points to mainstream and social media. There is no longer freedom of speech within our own broadcast news. Our local newspapers' editors' bias insists there's only one side of the story. The College of Physicians and Surgeons has told medical doctors that vaccines are the only course to take. Health Canada is funded primarily by pharmaceutical companies. There are approved treatments for SARS-CoV-2. However, these treatments and the value of natural immunity have been suppressed. We have been lied to by profit-driven entities. Pfizer alone has hit the $36 billion mark in profits. Vaccinated or unvaccinated, this pandemic is not about a virus, it's enforced compliance. I request the Mapleton Township Council officials to respond to me in writing with answers to the 5 questions. And I would appreciate the presentations, the references, and the internet links and the responses be placed on the Mapleton Township page. Remembrance Day is approaching and the veterans fought worldwide for freedom. Reflect on what these vaccine passports and mandates have done to the free movement of the citizens of Canada in the world. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Joyce. We just remain there in case there's questions from council. I'll remind council that you are not to offer an opinion or enter into any debate with the delegate, but you may ask questions of the delegate. So are there any questions from council to the delegate? Seeing none, thank you for attending.
Can I ask you a question,
You can go
Mr.
ahead.
Davidson? What is a case?
Sorry?
What is considered a case? You said cases were up
Right.
in
so
Mapleton Town.
those are
What
the-
is a case?
Those are the ones reported to public health.
What is reported? What criteria is needed to report a case?
That's a question for public health to answer that question. Of how they do the reporting. Thank you for attending. I do have a resolution here moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Ottens, that the Township of Mapleton Council receive for information the delegation of Joyce Slope regarding vaccination passports to be rescinded to enable all residents to enter facilities, businesses within the Township of Mapleton without restriction. Any comments on this? Councillor Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I ask for a recorded vote on this, please?
You may, Mr. Clerk. A recorded vote on this, please. Hang on one second. Okay, we're going to do a recorded vote, and can you please put your mask back on now that you're done speaking? Thank you.
Councillor Ottens,
This is just to receive.
Receive for information.
Yes.
Councillor Douglas,
Nay.
Councillor Craven, Councillor Martin,
Nay.
the mayor, sir.
No. That's 3 no's. Thank you. So that failed. Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is item number 8. We have the Mapleton Parks and Recreation Committee draft minutes of the meeting. We have here moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Ottens, that the draft minutes of the Mapleton Parks and Recreation Committee held on Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021 be received for information, and further that the 3 submissions received for 50/50 funding, all of which were accepted and approved by the Parks and Recreation Committee, be hereby further approved by the Township of Mapleton Council in the following allotments. Drayton Rotary Club, $5,000 for the Rotary Lookout overlooking the river at the new proposed park. Drayton Minor Hockey, $3,051 for smaller sized hockey nets. And Drayton Mapleton Agricultural Society, $5,000 for replacement of the fire escape at the Agricultural Hall. And I've read that, and I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Ottens, as you were at that meeting. You have anything further to comment on that?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Davidson. Yeah, just drawing attention to the 50/50 projects. We thought they were all very good. The Ag Society has some financial issues to pay for this fire escape, but I did inform them that the county might also have grants available that they could access and that they were going to look into that as well. And then also just drawing attention that the strategic master plan is going to be coming to council probably the next meeting or two. And just the other item to draw attention to was the security guard at the arena, I guess, is going to stay for now because they consulted with the user groups of maybe taking turns to volunteer in that position, but some of the user groups were not amenable to that idea. So we'll just keep the guard, I guess, for now as needed.
Thank you, Councillor Ottens. Questions or comments from council members? Councillor Craven.
Were there only 3 submissions for 50/50 funding?
Yes, but there is money still left over in case some more submissions come later on in the year, especially with COVID. The service groups sometimes don't know what their plans are going to be, given all their limitations on meetings. So we wanted to leave some money in there in case somebody applies later, maybe in the spring.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Craven again?
Yeah, and some of the groups that are normally would apply for funding may not have been meeting for a year and a half and may not have started the meetings up again, so they have no idea what they might need funding for. So there could be some more applications. I presume all these groups have been notified of the fact again.
Mr. Martina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Craven. Yes, all the user groups were issued letters in September or late August, early September, advising them of the program. And so everyone's aware that the 50/50 fund is available. And if there's, as Councillor Ottens mentioned, if there's more submissions later in the year, we can look at them as well, because there was some funding left in the account.
Thank you, Mr. Martina. Any further questions on this? Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding the meeting times, I brought this up before. I think it's important that committee meetings have the discretion to create their own schedule. But I would just suggest that a 4 o'clock meeting time is awkward considering the demographic that we try to have on that particular committee. So I'm just curious kind of what, maybe if Councillor Ottens, just you have context for kind of how that time came about compared to an evening meeting that's been in the past.
Thank you for your questions. Councillor Ottens?
Yeah, it worked with the existing committee. There was one member who just wasn't coming at all. So we tried different times to see if that person would work, especially when we were meeting through Zoom a few times. And it seemed to work for the people to meet at 4, and it works well with the staff because they're here still. Otherwise, if we meet at 6, they have to stay longer. So as long as it suits to meet at 4, we will. When there's a new committee in the following term, then maybe that time will change again. It's kind of like you said, it's flexible based on the membership of the committee.
Anything further to add to that, Mr. Martina? No? Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? I'll ask a question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, it's Township Building Department report. Moved by Councilor Otten, second by Councilor Douglas. The Township of Mapleton Council received for information the Building Department Report BD 2021-14 dated November 9th, 2021 regarding the October month end and year to date. Patty, do you have anything to offer us today?
I have nothing further to add, but I'd be happy to field any questions.
Thank you. And just for council, I know we have some questions here. We have another positive report here this month. And I want council to take note that our team in the building department have been working extremely hard in 2021 as the current building climate has been a boom in Mapleton. To put this in perspective, our team has processed more than 403 permits, more like 412, I think we're around there. And this represents the most permits cleared in the last dozen years. And 2021 is not yet over. So back in 2018 was the closest when they processed 379 permits that year. So I just want to offer congratulations, Patty, to you and the team in the building department for breaking the 400 permit mark. That's an excellent number. I know that it takes a lot of work to get that done. That means your team is working on all 8 cylinders. I'm going back to my old 75 Chevy car. So all 8 cylinders. And it's just really gratifying to see how hard you're working and that the community is building and we're allowing them to build and allowing them to do the work they do. And to the community, you know, we have a great team and ready to get that project moving. So if you have a project, you know, in the community, contact Patty and the team and we'll get that project moving. And I expect that 2022 will also be a boom year. So questions from council then on this report. Councilor Craven.
Well, I was going to wait a minute, but anyway, I will. I've been contacted by 2 people that were asking about these small houses on lots and so on. And I didn't really know how to give them an answer for that. So I contacted Patty. And Patty, you gave me a pretty good explanation, but if you want to pass that on to the rest of council, because I'm sure that the rest of council is going to be contacted about these small houses and so on lots.
Is right.
Through you, Mayor. I think that was referencing the secondary suite bylaw that was recently passed. And basically I just walked them through the bylaw that was passed and what the available options are for adding a secondary suite either to the building or in a detached unit. So that bylaw is available for anybody who wants to look at it. And if anybody has questions, just send them my way.
Yeah, that's a great bylaw that we added and the secondary suites and people, you know, if they want to add that secondary suite to their property, they're able to do that now. Councilor Martin.
Just thank you. Just as a point of interest, I think that bylaw has hit a demographic that surprised me. My 8-year-old has informed us that he's going to be building a tiny home for us in the backyard once he's older, and that's where we're going to live. I don't think he reads the paper, but somehow he's picked up on tiny homes coming into Drayton and Moorfield, and apparently that's where I'm going to be living in a few years. So just saying.
Apparently you don't need anything but this tiny home and he needs the big house. I just want to know which one of you gets the pool. Any further questions or comments on this report? All those in favor then? Thank you. That's a true story. And Patty, please pass on our gratitude as council to the team. Thank you. Next report we have here, moved by Councilor Douglas, second by Councilor Otten, is the Township Mapleton Council accepts for information the verbal update provided by the chief building official regarding with regard to urban backyard chickens. So Patty, urban backyard chickens.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is in response to an inquiry that Dennis brought forward. So what restricts us from having backyard chickens is out of the zoning bylaw. And it clearly states that no person in any residential zone keep or raise any livestock, bird, reptile, or wild animal, including any tamed or domestic wild animals. This provision shall not prevent the keeping of dogs, 3 dogs as per the Mapleton keeping of dogs bylaw on 1 lot. So in response, no bylaw is required to be brought forward to restrict it in residential zones because it's already accommodated in the zoning bylaw.
Thank you for that explanation. So there's no need to change the bylaw or to add a bylaw because it's in there already, no backyard chickens, basically, right? All right, Councilor Douglas.
Yeah, it's through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, I know there are some around. I'm wondering if there's been any complaints about the existing ones that are in place.
Through you, Mayor. We have, when we've received complaints, we have responded and dealt with them. I'm sure there's some out there that we don't proactively go out and patrol, but we do respond to any complaints about them, and we have had a number of them removed.
Thank you. Councilor Craven.
Yeah, I know there's one in Moorfield, and the 2 neighbors beside, one on each side, are not likely going to complain. One for a very good reason.
Thank you, Councilor Craven. Any further questions? Councilor Ottens.
Yes, through you, Mayor Davidson. Is there a need to perhaps address this within Mapleton and just have a bylaw allowing this within the limitations that are commonly done? I did consult the Chicken Farmers of Ontario just to see if they had a policy about backyard chickens, since disease is the issue always to transfer to commercial flocks, but they don't really. They do have a family food program that provides an avenue to get information on managing them and tracking disease if anyone was interested in having chickens in their backyard. So there is a whole policy there for anyone who's interested in doing it within the system. So do we want to have that within our system and allow that? Then we do have a way to sort of control it.
Well, thank you, Councilor Ottens. That's up to council to decide if we want to allow that or not. So it would take a notice of motion to change the bylaw that is written now to allow backyard chickens. So that's what have to be done by council to change that. So you'll have to find out that there's appetite from council to make that change and put that notice of motion on the floor.
Can I just follow up for a second?
Okay.
Has there been a lot of requests through to the staff at all here? Just wondering about that.
Clerk, no, sorry, Patty.
Through you, Mayor. I might get like 1 or 2 calls a year. Most of the requests are more rural, and they want to know what acreage they have to have. So basically, anybody with 2 acres can have 1,000 square foot barn, and it can have, you know, whatever livestock they want, providing they can meet the MDS to the neighbors. But not very often I get requests in town.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilor Craven again.
Yeah, we may, as we open up more and more lots, as we're hoping to do and are doing already, and hope to open up more, I think you're probably going to have more people come from the city. And they come out here, they sell their house for more than they pay for one here, live mortgage free here, and they think, well, out in the country, how about we get a few chickens and we can have some fresh eggs? So we're going to have to, I guess this bylaw does deal with that. But like Marlene said, if we want to allow them to have some, then we have no bylaw to cover that part. We can't say yes, period.
Thank you, Councilor Craven. Further comments or questions? And I'll call the question. All those in favor of receiving this? That's carried. Next on the agenda, we have CO Clerk's Department, Draft 2 of the procedural bylaw. And before I read this, I'm going to turn it over to the clerk. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second draft of our procedural bylaw that I've distributed and circulated tonight, I've put in red font recommendations made at the last meeting by the clerk and agreed to by council. In yellow highlight, I've inserted and altered changes specifically requested by council by consensus. And point 3 is, so if we could go to, if you wouldn't mind going to item 15.3, which is highlighted in green. I'm hoping I've captured our discussion regarding delegation request post-agenda publication.
So thoughts? Council Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would suggest you've nailed it.
I would agree with that. Any other comments on that item? Then continue, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 21 was a discussion council went through with regarding notices of motion. The previous entry is just above that in blue, and that came directly from the county, but it's not something that we traditionally followed here. So if we could have a look at 21.0 in green and let the clerk know if you're satisfied or whether you'd like alterations.
So we had this discussion at the last council meeting, and the clerk is bringing this information. This is directly out of Robert's rules, I believe.
This particular one is, I've gleaned from a number of township bylaws.
Okay. And I believe that also covers the information we were talking about at the last meeting. Any comments from council members? Okay, Mr. Clerk, continue on then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Going to the final page of the draft 2 bylaw, Schedule A. Council had discussion at our last meeting. They were unhappy with motions to defer to a specific time and motions to defer. What I've attempted to do here was insert the Roberts Rules version of those 2 motions. They're called a motion to postpone indefinitely and a motion to postpone to a certain time. I do believe this is what council was hoping to achieve.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So council want to discuss this? Councilor Craven?
So the word postpone, does that replace the word defer?
Yes, sir. Councillor Craven, Roberts Rules uses postpone.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm fine with the change. I don't, I think the discussion we had talked about was whether the motion itself would be debatable or not. And I guess my thinking about leaving it as not debatable is simply that you can project your opinion on the motion simply by your vote. And that the debate itself would have to be centered around the motion itself, not the original motion that we're talking about. So whether it's debatable or not kind of seems a little mundane or not even really applicable, right? Because your vote's that you cast is gonna determine that anyway.
Thank you, Councilor Martin. And so if you recall at the last meeting, we decided we were going to use Robert's Rules. And that's, Mr. Clerk took this right out of Robert's Rules, which is the exact wording that's in Robert's Rules. If Mr. Clerk, the exact wordings out of Robert's Rules? Okay, so that's why it's in there the way it is. It's exact wording of Robert's Rules that we said we were going to follow. Okay. Clerk, go ahead.
Just further on that, council was leaning at the last meeting towards deleting or getting rid of the motion to postpone indefinitely. However, I can imagine in the last month or 2 of council, if there was a big decision or perhaps a borrowing decision for several $1 million that you could envision a scenario where council may want to postpone that into the next term.
Yeah, I recall we did have that discussion to get rid of that one, and the clerk wisely used the Robert's Rules and brought both of them back according to what we decided to follow the rule base. Mr. Clerk, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, I can imagine councilors will have further insertions, deletions, or questions, and that'd be fine. Thank you.
All right, council, we'll turn it back over. So now we've had a chance to look at this again. And I know Councilor Douglas, I don't know if you have any comments. You didn't have any comments the last time around. You weren't available. So if you have anything, please bring it forward now. Anything else from members of council at this point in time? So I have one item that I want council to discuss before we move forward here. So in the procedural bylaw, I'd like us to discuss meeting times as stipulated in section 6.1. A comment that has been said to me more than once is that not everyone can run for a position on council because of the afternoon meeting time being an impediment. There are individuals that have asked that this be addressed so they have the opportunity to run in the 2022 municipal election. And I'm sure we can all agree that we want to be inclusive and we want the best for the township. And that means having the best people sitting around this table. Not that saying we're not the cream of the crop ourselves, but we have to give the opportunity to those other people. So I want council to consider having our meeting set for the second and fourth Tuesdays at 7 p.m. with the, of course, exclusions mentioned in Part C. And if we do make this change, I would also suggest that the date that this would begin would be January 1st, 2022. So that would affect this council and allow those in the community an opportunity to run for election in October of 2022. So I leave that open for council to discuss at this point in time. Councilor Craven?
I believe the appeal council, they had those types of hours, 2 meetings a month, one at night and one in the afternoon. So that continued when Mapleton was formed. Maryborough Township, we had night meetings were all we had. Now, I can't remember whether Drayton had afternoon or night meetings or what they had there, but I do know the appeal was the same as we are now. So I would think that we went to night meetings. Like you say, it opens up that people can run for election. And as far as having an afternoon or an evening meeting, so more people can attend, we get very few people attending these meetings anyway.
Thank you, Councilor Craven. Councilor Ottens?
Thank you. It was my understanding that the 2 times were done for flexibility purposes because not everyone can attend at 7. It's assumed everyone's a Monday to Friday 9 to 5, or which they aren't. For example, I can think of someone who has dairy farm chores. 1 would be better than 7 for that person. A single parent whose kids are in school would be easier. That person could attend meetings in the day easier than in the evening when they'd have to get a sitter. There's people on shift work. There's all kinds of different scenarios where 1 is just as good as 7. So I personally like the flexibility because it allows people opportunity to choose the kind of meeting that they suits their personal schedule better. So.
Thank you. Councilor Douglas?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Personally, it would definitely work better for me if there were evening meetings, as I have a typical 9 to 5 type job, but we're 3/4 of the way through this term. I'd probably prefer to just let the next term of council decide when they choose to meet.
The only difficulty with that, Councilor Douglas, is that there's a possibility someone won't run because they won't have the knowledge to know that the meeting is going to be both in the evening. So that is why I suggested that we start January 1st. That would give everyone that has an opportunity to say, okay, meetings are at 7:00 p.m. And now I can run. If we leave it to the next council, they can run and get on council, but then they would have difficulty of maybe not changing, and that's going to put an impediment on them. Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like it exactly how it is, to be honest. We discussed this earlier in our term of council. I think we get into dangerous territory when we start trying to make decisions for the next council. One of the very first things that a new council does is sits down and goes over the procedural bylaw. And so I would suggest if other people are thinking of running for council, or when we're talking to them, that, that can be the first order of business that they decide democratically on, because we could change it to 1 o'clock or go 7 o'clock now, and come 2023 it goes right back to where it was, right? So as a shift worker and being currently on council, I think we decided it for a number of reasons, including that it was a good compromise with our senior staff. And so we're not dragging them out of 2 meetings or having 2 evening meetings for them. My personal life is full of evening stuff with minor hockey, and I mean, the list goes on stuff, right? So my evenings are full too. So a 1 o'clock afternoon meeting for a shift worker, I think for delegations coming in, for, engineers, consultants, those types of things. Afternoon meetings can work and can work pretty effectively. And I like the flexibility, to be honest. So that would be what I would support.
Okay. Just wanted council to have that discussion. So we had that discussion. Council Craven?
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with Marlene, first of all, but if the dairy farmer wouldn't be able to sit on council very well if we had evening meetings, possibly. But I think the next council should be the ones that decide what they want to do. Their first order of business should be when are we going to have our meetings? But if you want to run for the next council term, should we make a change now so that people know a year from now whether they can make meetings or not?
Thank you, Council Craven. That is the question that we're discussing right now. And so it's just a show of hands. Those who would like to keep it the same as it is now, just give me a show of hands. All right, thank you. That was a good discussion. So, Mr. Clerk, that stays the same. Anything further, Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All being reasonably happy, I will bring the bylaw. I'll provide some notice and bring the bylaw back to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So before I read the resolution, or any more comments or questions? Mr. Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to pass along. I know yourself and the clerk have put an awful lot of time into the review of this procedural bylaw. So I just want to say thank you for that. I know, Larry, it took you a bunch of time to review all these changes. So I appreciate you looking into it for us.
And it's all the clerk. I just had some discussions with the clerk when he was almost done everything. So good all to the clerk. So I'll read the motion here. The motion moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Douglas, that Township of Mapleton Council received for information Clerk's Report 2021-13 dated November 9th, 2021 regarding draft 2 of the new procedural bylaw. And further that the verbiage highlighted in yellow inserted as requested or directed by council into draft 2 of the new procedural bylaw be approved by council, incorporated into the new procedural bylaw. And for that new item 15.3 highlighted in green regarding allowing delegation requests post-agenda publication be inserted as written into the new procedural bylaw. And for that replacement item 21 highlighted in green entitled notices of motion be inserted as written into the new procedural bylaw. And for that Schedule A item 1C be replaced with Robert's Rules of Order highlighted in green and inserted as written into the new procedural bylaw. And for that Schedule A item 1D be replaced with Robert's Rules of Order highlighted in green and inserted as written into the new procedural bylaw. And further that the alterations, additions, and recommendations to the draft 2 procedural bylaw put forth by council here today be incorporated into a new procedural bylaw for consideration at a future meeting of council. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. That was a lot to read there, clerk. Moving on to the 9.3, the finance. We have 9.31 water and wastewater rates for 2022, 2023. And I'm going to turn that right over to the finance director, Mr. Morrison.
Through you, your worship, this is the rates are being proposed for the next year and potentially for the next 2 years. We took a look at, we're basically proposing that the variable rates remain unchanged and that the fixed rates, as per our policy, be increased to pay for the asset acquisitions that are currently underway. We've already set in motion the building of the water tower. We've already secured the debenture of the money.
We've already began building it. We're going to be using development money into this project. So the rates that you're seeing here is required to pay for that. And those rates moving forward, and I'm hoping to also moderate as we move forward when we start to look at the water master and wastewater plan that may also impact the rates even upwards higher. So the rates are not the best. We advised council when they accepted the tender that the rates were going to go up at least 77 cents a day. Now they're going up 80 cents a day because we've incorporated some of the asset management planning that came from SEMA Plus. It's still less than some of our neighboring municipalities in terms of the overall impact of the quality of the water. So at this point, I think it's a fair rate to establish as we move forward in time, because I don't think the master plans are going to reduce the rates any further.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. The motion here is moved by Councillor Craven, second by Councillor Martin, that Township of Mapleton Council receive a finance report FIN 2021-21 regarding water and wastewater rates for the years 2022 to 2023, and that staff be directed to amend the fees and charges bylaw for water and wastewater rates per Appendix A of this report effective January 1st, 2022. Questions, comments from council then? Councillor Douglas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Morrison, just wondering if you could speak to, if we didn't support this increase, would that result in the tax base continuing to support the water users?
Mr. Morrison.
Through you, your worship, absolutely, that's what it means. The difference between the rates that we have in 2021 to 2022 is over $300,000. And $300,000 is what is driving the debt that we incurred to build it. So if you don't want to collect it from the ratepayers, where's the money coming from? It's got to come from the taxpayers. And that's where it will come from.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. That's pretty clear. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't, this is an awkward spot to be in. I mean, a 22% increase on water rates based on the amount that we've increased on the last couple of years. I mean, I don't know how many people bought gas or groceries or looked at their tax bill, looked at our budget for next year, another 4%. I mean, everything's going up, and I mean, I work in the public sector too, but my wage has not gone up to catch up with all these inflationary pressures. And 22% is a big number. Now, we listened to John, we listened closely to his advice all the way through this stuff, and I'm not gonna start here by discounting what his advice is. But we have to be able to justify it to the people, because it's gonna, I mean, 22.1% is gonna cause a fuss, and I think it should, right? There should be questions asked. I'm wondering if it would be considered reasonable by council to wait for the master plan to come back, so we actually have some information and justification for the rate increase. You know, maybe we need to look at, I know SEMA Plus has created a work plan for us. Some of it I think has caught us off guard as far as our catch-up goes. You know, maybe we can spread some of this stuff out over a period of time. Like maybe it doesn't all have to be done in 2022. I just, like, this is a bad, it's a challenging time. And to go up by $51 on your bill, we get it billed bi-monthly, is something that I think everyone's gonna feel. So I don't know if that's something we'd consider, if that would be prudent. Do we have a timeline on what that master plan return looks like? And I guess that would be my comment. It's an awkward spot.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Martina, the master plan timing, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the master plan process with all the legislative requirements and such and notices that are required will at least another year before we get the master plan back.
Thank you, Mr. Martina. And Mr. Morrison, if we wait to the master plan, we'll be short $300,000. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Mr. Craven.
I'm in the same boat as Michael, only worse. I don't get a paycheck and the government payroll hasn't increased in the last few years at all. So there.
It is a tough position that we are in. And I believe all but one of us on council is on water and wastewater. And certainly we can look at this. I know that I've talked to my wife about this and she is not really happy about it. She's looking at retiring next year. So that would be a difficult position for us as well as a change of income. So definitely a very difficult time to be adding. However, as Mr. Morrison pointed out and Councilor Douglas asked the question, would it go onto the taxpayer? And if $300,000 need to go on the taxpayer, that also is not fair because we have the residents of Drayton and Moorfield would be then subsidized by all the other residents, including our farmers, about with their water and wastewater. And that is just not right as well. So we have to certainly figure this out. And it is as Councillor Martin pointed out, it is a big bite out of people's budget, $50 extra every 2 months. Absolutely. Councillor Craven.
We obviously need more people.
Yeah, more users would definitely make a change, Councillor Craven. And that we're working on that in the background as well, whether it be adding more homes, adding more businesses that need water and wastewater. All those add into that. We don't have, we are a small utility. And being a small utility, if you look at small utilities anywhere, their rates are quite high unless they're being subsidized by the tax base. And that's what we're trying to avoid here. Any further comments, questions? Councillor Martin.
I mean, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a logical argument. However, that's, I'm assuming that number is based on what our projected expenditures are over the next number of years. Our capital projects are at $1.8 million for next year. I don't know if the director of Public Works, would we be able to find $300,000 in those? Are those expenditures absolutely needed, or will the master plan tell us something different? Or we've got two expenditures that are over $700,000 each. Is it something, would it be worth investigating, pausing or revisiting some of those possible expenditures if we needed to?
You're referring to the expenditures of water and wastewater, correct? Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Martina.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Martin. So the expenditures that are in the capital plan are planned expenditures that are required to achieve our goal. However, they are best guess estimates based on the information that we have. It's always possible that tenders will come back favorable. So, we're hoping that our estimates are correct and perhaps there's some room to play there, but it's hard to say. Look at the results of the water tower, what happened, COVID hit and the prices jumped. So, we're hoping that as we put out the tenders early enough that the return on those numbers will leave some money for us in our budget, but it could also go the other way. So, but the projects that are on the schedule are required in order to meet our future goals.
We do have obligations as well to maintain our water system. That's provincially mandated. We have to maintain it. And water is certainly becoming more expensive. And, I think the days of taking the tap, turning it on and watering your lawn for 4 hours are gone. And people have to realize that You know, that's good potable water that we're watering lawns with, and it's expensive. So, Mr. Morrison, the question then would be, if there was these two $700,000 projects, if we were to wait until those tenders came in, as Councillor Martin has suggested, we wait for the master plan, but the master plan is that far away. If we were to wait for those two tenders to come in hopes that the values would be less than what was put into the budget, would that change anything on the increase?
Through you, your worship. I don't think it would materially change in the way in which you're hoping it would change. So you could defer a project and therefore presumably not transfer as much of a reserve from these ratepayers into the environmental reserve. But you're almost kind of like, the whole point is, of the master plan is to get from point A to B, knowing that your costs are going to be increasing. So deferring it might be just a tactical thing, but you're not really going to change it from $25 to $10 or something like that, because you're still going to have to think further ahead. And doing it now means you're not going to have to make those harder decisions if we do the costing right moving forward in time. So that's why we've engaged the SEMA Plus. It's not going to reduce your rates. What they're going to do is tell us how to get our rates so that you're not in a situation like, holy smokes, there's a 22% increase. What happened here is that this problem occurred 10 years ago, and you're paying the price. So I don't know how to help you, because these projects, even if you try to defer them, you're going to make yourself another problem, because you're not saving enough money moving forward to pay for the projects, to pay for some of those things that are important for growth. Because if you had growth, the rates would go down. The bigger the base, the less impact it would have on you. There's a reason that the big cities are cheaper, because they have a larger population. We need to grow the base, not in a crazy way, but enough that the rates would be moderated, that you won't see the increases from year to year like this. So a master plan is just planning it out, planning when the people are going to come, planning when we should be putting in the increases in our rating, planning when we should be upgrading the sanitary sewer systems based on when we need to do it. And if you defer a project, you could nudge the reserves down a little bit. But is that really helping in the long run? I don't think it is, but that's your decision.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. So we have multi-millions of dollars in projects that need to get done to maintain and to keep our water system running smoothly for our community. But we only have 948 users. So 948 users, basically what you're saying, they have to pay the burden of what needs to be done. And if I can reference what you just said, had rates been changing over a period of time, you said 10 years ago, we knew this, we should have been doing this. Had rates been changing since that time, then we wouldn't be in the predicament we are in now. Is that what you're suggesting?
Sorry, through you, your worship, you would have had a plan to move the rates up year by year so that you're not burning, it's not a big increase in any one year. So instead of going, I think for the first few years, we were going up less than 1%. And yet, if I had known what were the cost, I would be saying we should go up 5, 6, 7%. And instead, now we're talking 22%. So there's a problem here in terms of knowing and looking ahead as to what you're planning to spend and figuring out the rates that you need to get there to spend it. Right now, the rates that I'm proposing for you is mostly covering off the decisions you've already made. And I've been very cautious not to increase that because I'm not sure where we're going forward in the rates.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Councillor Ottens.
Thank you. Going ahead into the agenda, I noticed in the Public Works Quarterly Report, a number of the projects from this year have come in under budget. So is it possible to apply that surplus to this added cost? I realize that's coming from the general ratepayers, but it's already budgeted and collected. So is that something that could be done to lower this increase?
But then again, you're adding, that's tax-based. And you're adding that. So now that you're back to people not on water and wastewater subsidizing people on water and wastewater. And that to me is wrong. Those people should not be subsidizing the farmers in the community, the people in Rossley and Alma. They should not be subsidizing water and wastewater for Drayton and Moorfield residents that are on the system. I understand where you're going with that. If it was money spent or funding that was allocated for water and wastewater projects that are coming in under budget, we have that extra, then I'd be all for that with you. I'm just very reluctant, and I think that's what the point that Councilor Douglas was pointing out is that using that kind of money to do that.
Well, I realize that, but I'm the one that's suggesting it and I'm the one that's not on it. So I just thought perhaps maybe there'd be other people who would feel that way as well. We do benefit from the whole community having fresh water. We use the water in town when we go there, so it's not as if it's not beneficial for all of us to have a safe community.
Thank you. Councilor Martin.
So, we keep talking about growth and we need growth, and growth is gonna help mitigate the rates, and this may not be a fair question, but my personal experience, and I love this town, I love this community, I'm not going anywhere, but the rates have been going up since I got here. If growth is so good, then at what point are we gonna see that? Where are we gonna hit the peak and start to seeing the benefits of it? I know our growth has been awkward the last bunch of years. No one could have envisioned, it's not John's fault the water tower came in $1 bajillion over budget. So I understand we got to pay for that. But what I'm suggesting is maybe a master plan. It may not alter the rates, it might increase them for all I know. But at least maybe it gives us a vision and a path forward that I can say to Mikey Martin Jr., my neighbor, to say this is why we're there, right? And I just like 22%, 22.1% is not nothing. It is a big increase. And I don't know, like what kind of, John, would you have an idea? Like, I know you can't guess about inflation and stuff, but how many users would you feel we would need to get on a system to get to the point where we can start to mitigate some of these increases? I understand it's not a fair question, but.
Well, through you, your worship, actually I'm playing games like that now. So I'm looking 20 years ahead. And I noticed that if our development community were to build out within the next 5 years, you could see the rates drop because you get that many more users on your system. But I need a master plan to say, is that a good idea? Do we want to drop the rates? Depending on where you want to go. So the master plan is not going to see in a year's time a recommendation that the rate's going to be lower. That's not going to happen. They're going to go up. And all we're doing is deferring that increase for a year. That's going to cost the taxpayers at least $300,000. The debt alone that we've incurred from Ontario infrastructure is going to be around 200,000. And then we have to pay for the developers' interest until we collect all their money from them, which means we have to wait for them to build, to sell the lots and get the building permits in. And then when those people come online, you'll start to see choices that can be made. It will be you can make a moderation in the rates. You have to choose what your growth pattern will be, how fast you want to grow, where you want to go. But I'm telling you, if they just build out now, I would, the rates go up and then they go down. And then they might go up depending on another project and then they go down. Well, I don't want to see that. I want to go, in an arc, but somebody has to give me a better vision as to what the numbers would be. Otherwise, it goes up and down like a yo-yo.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Mr. Bettina, we have those two projects, and I know that Councillor Martin brought those two projects up. When would we expect to have them tendered and returned so we would know what the value would be of those?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, those two particular projects are, one is the result, or they're both actually the result of the condition assessment that's been done. So we know exactly what the requirements are to fulfill these two projects. I think if we got the okay, well, we do have the okay to begin with 2022 projects. So I would think we can probably get specifications written up and a tender issued probably in the next 2 months.
And return by that period of time in 2 months, or?
Yeah, we can get the specifications ready within 2 months, and the tender period, another couple of weeks. So 2 or 3 months max, we'll have an answer on what the value of these contracts are, and for council's information.
Thank you. So, Mr. Morrison, I realize, sir, that you had said that if we don't follow through with this, we'd have to go to the tax base. Would that 3-month period, what would that be an acceptable period to wait to move the rates instead of January 1st, move them, say, March 30th or April 1st? How would that change things? And the other question I would have in this council discussion here is, right now, as Councillor Martin pointed out, it's a 22% increase. If we were to do, say, an 11% increase in January 1st and then wait to see what those two projects are coming in at, to see if we need to either reduce or maybe even further increase that, for all I know, by after we see those two projects. So just a 2-point question there, Mr. Morrison.
Through you, your worship, I would suggest that the rates have to go up to at least cover the debt charges that you've incurred. So we're talking right now over 300,000, they have to go up at least 200,000. Because you've already made that decision. That's a done deal. We've got the money that's already in the bank. The money's going to start flowing out of the bank on January 1st. So if you don't collect it, every week or every month, you're just going to lose money on that. So 3 months, 3 months of 200,000, I guess, is what you would calculate it out at.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. That answers the question clearly. Mr. Craven.
That's not a bad idea to maybe raise the rates by 11% now and maybe 11% in July. But you might as well raise the 22% now, have the people complain about it, and then in a short time, they're going to quit complaining and bite the bullet, rather than have them complain in January and again in July because they got a bigger increase. So I think you might as well go with the big amount right now.
Thank you, Mr. Craven. Mr. Martin.
Thank you. I get Councillor Craven, but it's not about the complaints, right? It's about having something tangible I can have in my hands to say, like, this is why we're doing it. Like John's providing good rationale, but like that master plan would be even better. I was not anticipating a 1-year timeline, though. That kind of throws a curveball, and I would love more time to think about it though before making a decision tonight, if that would be reasonable. I don't know what that looks like, but even another meeting or two would be, let this thing keep working.
Mr. Morrison, just a further question. We do have grant funding that we are applying for, and we're just waiting to see if we actually get that grant funding. One for Moorfield Water Station, the other one for a pumping station here in Drayton. If we were to receive both of those, Mr. Morrison, how would that change these rates, if anything?
It would depend on the total cost, how much grant money you receive, and whether we elect to choose to reduce the reserves accordingly. And so the grant money that we receive means that obviously we don't have to use reserve money. So it goes back to the rates would be, do you need to transfer as much into the reserves if you're not using that much money? So it's a problematic answer that you just need to tell me how much more money you're going to get and what was the actual cost. And I could calculate whether we could reduce the reserves or not.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Councilor Martin?
A real quick one. This is an easy one, I promise. The numbers that you projected of 25.48 a month, what was that? How many cubic meters of usage? Was that like around the 18 to 20 a month type thing?
About
The answer was 10 to that question. Further questions, comments, thoughts? Let me read this resolution one more time. Moved by Councillor Craven, second by Councillor Martin, that the Township of Mapleton Council receive finance report FIN 2021-21 regarding water and wastewater rates for the years 2022 to 2023, and direct staff to amend the fees and charges bylaw for water and wastewater rates per Appendix A of this report effective January 1st, 2022. That's currently what the motion reads. Councilor Martin.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to defer the decision on this report pending the passing of the budget.
We have a motion to defer on the table. So we have a motion to defer to, do you have a specific date, Mr. Martin?
No, I would anticipate that the 2022 budget will get passed before the January 1st based on our schedule. So I'd have to look up the date when that's projected, that meeting is projected, but.
Mr. Barron, do you have the date of that, or Clerk Wheeler, do you have the date of that? When we're going to pass the budget?
I'll just check with the CAO, but I believe it's December 15th.
Yeah.
Mr. Morrison?
My draft says it's November 23rd.
So after November 23rd, so you would suggest then the meeting in December, the first meeting in December? Would that be enough time, Mr. Morrison?
I'd have to defer that to the clerks, whether it requires our notification by law.
So there's plenty of time for notice, Mr. Morrison. So December the 14th, Mr. Clerk? Right? So your motion then would be to defer until December 14th, Mr. Martin? So we have a motion on the floor to defer until December the 14th. So I'll call the questions. Motion to defer. All those in favor to defer this until December 14th, raise your hand. That is carried. Thank you. So that is deferred until December 14th to make a decision. Thank you, council, for that discussion. It is a really hard topic for us. knowing that we raised the rates, thinking we had everything going tickety-boo. And then, of course, the water tower coming in at such a high price, which is certainly causing us a lot of angst. So we have here the 9.32, which is the second draft of the budget book. So Mr. Morrison, please take the podium.
So this is the second draft, and I will remind council and those citizens who are listening, this is the third year of our multi-year budget. Right now, because it's a multi-year budget, we're not permitted to allocate any of the surplus until at the end of a third year budget. So in year one, or on our financial statements, in the current fund, there's already 485,000 is a surplus. And we just gave you a projection that we might have 184,000 by the end of this year. And then we have next year as well to consider what that surplus would be. So this is part of our strategy to develop and stabilize both the tax rates in this debate we just had with the water rates. And we're doing it based on some principles that we've introduced, and these principles have been introduced pretty much in almost every municipality right now. It's one of sustainability, which is what it means. Can we maintain our assets? Can we maintain our level of service? The other is about vulnerability. How dependent are we on other sources of income? Can we do things to help ourselves, like make the specific users pay for their own service, or partner with other municipalities in terms of sharing the costs of those services? And how flexible are we? You know, can we take on debt when we have to? Can we defer some of these rate increases that we might find difficult? So that's what all is involved in the long-term financial planning. At the same time, we're doing this vision of both the short term, which is the current rate that was before our eyes, and the long term is all the projects that we want to build, and how we should be incorporating in those rates certain asset management concepts called replacement. And replacement costs is not something we have done historically, which is causing some of the problem in our recent debate with the water, because replacement means is that when you're costing in something, you're not only thinking about what it's going to pay for today's dollars, but what you need to pay for tomorrow's dollars, and what projects are going to create the growth that will kind of moderate the rates moving forward. And you're seeing these concepts play out with you in this 3-year budget, and it's in this 10-year capital budget. So I'm sorry, I'm not really moving on too well, but so these principles, and there's more than 9 of them, we only put 5 here. we're trying to give you targets. We're trying to have you understand that the principles can sometimes conflict with each other. So yes, we might have the second highest water rates in the county next year. But within 5 years, we might not have the second highest rates in the county. 2 years ago, we had one of the lowest rates in the county. Did it help us? I'm not sure, but so we're looking at all these assets. We're looking at this life cycle and making certain that we have the money to build the infrastructure when it's in place. And right now, we've had SEMA Plus do it for our water and wastewater, and we want them to even look further out ahead as to what it would be. We should be doing it for the roads, and we'll do it for the bridges, and we're going to do it for the stormwater sewer system as well. And these things will also see significant increases in the cost. So right now, at the time we wrote this, the township has the slowest net growth in the county, 0.26%. So I've had some good news in the last week where the assessments actually coming in from some commercial assessments from some of the feed companies that will actually reduce the impact of the tax rate. But I won't know that till the second Tuesday in December, when the roll of return is provided by impact to the municipalities. So it may not be as significant as what I have on this presentation. The tax rate stabilization is being used this year as we've decided to mitigate the impact of COVID. The COLA increases is per our policy. The August inflation rate and the September inflation rate is even higher than this COLA increase. I had to make changes to revise insurance premiums. That is significant. We've, in the years, we've introduced a recreational program. We've made the planning department a user pay model that has taken the weight of the taxpayers, while the taxpayers are no longer having to pay for this planning function. And we are asking for service level requests for additional resources to bring certain databases to life, or what we would need for procurement, for bringing back an executive assistant that we've deferred through the pandemic so that we can become more efficient in our organization. So the base budget, a 1% increase in the base budget is about $85,000. The COLA increase is about 2.4. The associate benefits is another 24,000. Insurance is hitting us by 88,000. Executive assistant at the is about 78. The purchasing coordinator is another 78. We've saved some money. The net for user pay is about, we're going to gain back 6,484. And we found some operational savings. One is an operational, we just got a bit more OMF, more money from the province, from the OMPF funding, about 12,600, and we realized the municipal drainage account was about $85,000 over budget. So we found some savings in that area as well. So as you can see, next year we're paying about 42% of the budget's going to roads and sidewalks. 30% is going to water and wastewater. And that 30% is intended to spur growth so that we can increase the base. Over the next 10 years, it's going to be $64 million, 31% or 20 million for water and wastewater. Roads is another 36%, which is a 23 million. And bridges, about 10 million 10.7 million at 6.5%. So the tax rates, well, the levy increase is 4.02. The tax rate increase, based on what I know of the assessment base, will be about 3.75% from 21 to 22. But from over the 3 years, it's about 1.5. And as I was saying to you, we're probably going to get a bit more assessment in the next couple of months. There's specifically, we had great commercial assessment coming in from the feed company. So you'll probably see that impact less than 3.75. This is what I'm trying to get to, is that when staff is looking at this, we're looking 20 years out. So these two yellow lines, these rating increases the ability of the town to actually grow with more population and more people. So if we build out to current capacity, 26 add in, to 13 cubic meters per day, 10 years, those rates that you're having struggling with will moderate. So that's where the moderation comes from. So it's important with these projects that are related to growth be looked at. What I'm interested in knowing for sure, is having a very good educated guess of what the next ones would be. 18 cubic meters and 23 cubic meters. What does that mean to the municipality? Because we're looking not in this decade, but in the decade following us. And if I have that, I know where our rates would need to grow to and how much they should be growing a year based on all these other capital assets. So this is the current funding plan. So you can see we've already secured 2.6. We're going to use $2 million. We're going to use the gas tax and the unconditional grants. And the capital reserves are going to help fund that. And then the environmental reserves have to start paying out the interest back to the capital. So that's where some of that money is going to start being needed to pay for those extra funds. And that's 185,000. It's just repaying the capital. And it's not repaying the OCIF fund, which is another 200,000. So that's why I'm saying you've already committed a lot of the money to existing projects. So ideally, when you're looking at it, you want to see this rise going forward. You don't like what this is telling me. It's going up here, here, here. Well, we could bring it down a bit, and then we got to go up again. And then by the time we're out here, to go down and down. But you wouldn't do that in practice. So we need to kind of build it moving forward in a steady fashion. That's why I prefer the master plan coming forward. So we've already discussed this. We'll defer it, and it's obviously 11.5 cubic meters that I was using. This is the typical volume of the average residential person. So I'm using our behavior pattern. If I take that behavior pattern and put it in Wellington North, they're going to be paying, I think, $150 a month rather than $140, because their rates are a bit more expensive than ours. So overall, the 10-year trend line in terms of taxation revenue is starting to level out. You're starting to see discretionary reserves fluctuate with capital expenditures, but ideally over a longer period of time, all those lines should be in a steady, straight parallel. So in terms of overall summary, you have a COLA increase with the rate of inflation. We have reflecting higher insurance premiums. We've now undertaken a recreational department. The planning department's on a user pay model. And we're requesting the service level changes for database management, planning and operational improvements. The year-over-year increase per tax burden is 3.75. The average over the last 3 years is 1.5. In capital expenditures, the Rate and Water Tower is underway. It's being built. We're spending in equal amounts upgrading the well supply capacity, upgrading the pumping station, increasing the rating capacity for the water pollution control plant. Those projects will bring growth into the municipality, and that growth will moderate those rates moving forward. And we're using an asset management costing approach to determine priorities. So what that means is that we should be looking at the condition of the asset. We should be saying, oh, if we don't do that, what's the risk of the municipality? Will this asset fall down? Will we get a lot more potholes? What do we want to do with the service level? So by using that approach in a scientific way and then rating them all, you're going to see the priorities being rationally determined for you. And you're going to see a lot more educated guesses as to what the cost is, as opposed to the way we've historically been doing it, which is sometimes an assumption that we carry forward and we don't challenge the assumption year to year, which is what we should be doing. So is there any questions? Because we could go now if you wish to in any specific item on the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. And just before we get the questions, I will read the resolution moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Craven, that Township Mapleton Council received for information the second draft of budget book provided by Director of Finance John Morrison, and further that Township Mapleton Council received for information the presentation by Director of Finance John Morrison entitled Multi-Year Budget 2020 to 2023, year number 3. So now we'll open it up to questions from members of council. Questions, Mr. Morrison, about his presentation or the budget book? Councillor Ottens?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Davidson. Just some comments on the budget. I'm glad to see that Side Road 15 was consolidated. I think this is a public works reference here because it had been spread out in all these segments. This makes way more sense to me logistically. And that also goes to Edward Street. I think there was issues with that as well, that it was parceled out over several years and now it's all one. One thing I noticed was that maybe I'm not reading this right, but sidewalks has $70,000 a year in the capital budget, which is good. But then I noticed in the operating budget, there's also $63,000 for sidewalk repair. Is that 2 separate sidewalk projects, or how is that? How does that make sense?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Ottens. I generally use both accounts in my sidewalk program. So I will combine those figures or those amounts when we set up the program for 2022 and the repairs and the plan for repairs as we go forward. So I will use both of those funds.
Thank you, Ms. Bettina. Continue, Councillor Ottens.
Another thing I noticed is that we're still contracting work out for ditching and grading and dust control. Is that not stuff that staff can do with the equipment to have? Did we not buy equipment that we could do all that ourselves now?
Mr. Bettina.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, not yet. We do not have the required equipment to conduct the excavation work ourselves at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Bettina. Further questions from council members? Comments? Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Director Morrison. I'm not trying to cause you fits, but in light of the water wastewater projected rates, I'm assuming, I wasn't here for draft 1, but I'm assuming the 4% levy increase was kind of to touch the inflationary increases, right, on the year over year. Would there be a way anyway, considering that the 985 wastewater customers are also on the hook for property taxes, would there be some way to try and mitigate the out-of-pocket expenses from a property tax side? Like, could we look at savings somewhere within this budget to try and mitigate the wastewater expense?
Mr. Morrison.
You already directed us back to doing that, and we found about $125,000 in savings. So I think we already followed your instructions from the first round. If there was a need for more, we'd have to go back and review it.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. So council directed staff at the last budget go around to lower the rate to the 4% mark. And that's what Mr. Morrison is referring to, that it was, if I can't remember, 5 point. Mr. Morrison, you remember the number it was at? Over 5%, 5 point something, and council directed Mr. Morrison to go to 4% or around 4%. That's where we're at today. So there's the savings at over 1% savings that staff had found, which is, if you look at the budget, the 3-year average, the tax burden over the 3-year average, $7.15 per $100,000. That's pretty good. We've done quite well here as council and staff to only increase $7.15 per 100,000 in property value over the last 3 years, including this budget here, a 1.5%, which is something this township hasn't seen in many years. So I have to give accommodations where they're due to Mr. Morrison and the team and the tax team, as well as all staff, to find those efficiencies to be able to provide our residents only $7.15 per 100,000 over the last 3 years on average. Follow up, Mr. Martin? No. Mr. Craven? No. Councilor Douglas? Councilor Ottens, anything further? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. So I read the resolution there to move this forward to the next public meeting. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. You got off a little easier this time around, Mr. Morrison, and than you did a few minutes ago. Moving on to Public Works, we'll put Mr. Matina into the hot seat now. We move by Councillor Craven, second by Councillor Martin, that the Township of Mapleton Council receive Public Works Report PW 2021-11 dated November 9th, 2021, regarding the 2021 Public Works Capital Program Quarterly Update number 3 for information. Mr. Matina, you're on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In general, this report just basically provides the third quarter update, an overview of the program, and just reiterates basically the volumes that we have put out in capital program, capital tenders to this point. So 32 projects valued at $9.73 million. Overall, there's one anomaly in the numbers, of course, is the water tower coming in tender a couple $1 million more than we have anticipated. But otherwise, generally, the capital program is progressing well, and we anticipate favorable variance results at the conclusion of the year. And the water tower has just thrown that number off a little bit, but generally, if you discount the tower, we're in good shape going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Matina. I don't think any of us are going to with the tower, we can't pretty well throw that out of our heads because it's causing us angst when it comes to our water rates. But thanks for the suggestion to help us out. Questions for Mr. Matina? Seeing none? Then I move the question. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Moving on to the next one, item 9.51. Moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Craven, that the Township Mapleton Council receive for information Recreation Report 2021-06 dated November 9th, 2021 regarding the after-school program. And further, that council received the County of Wellington operating criteria for camps, authorized recreation programs for information. And further, that council approved the fee subsidy agreement from the County of Wellington. And I turn this over to Amy Gross.
Good evening, Council. Through you, Your Worship, we have been operating our after-school program since September fairly successfully. We're really excited about the progress it's making. And we currently have a temporary fee subsidy agreement with the county. We have had our assessment done, which is the Wellington operating criteria, where the county comes in and assess our program. They also assess our policies and procedures. The process is very thorough and it is very time consuming, but it's great because it ensures that we are offering quality care with our program. And it allows for families that need it to apply for any fee subsidies in order to attend our program. So we were really happy with the results. We did well. In order to meet the criteria, you have to meet the majority of the components they're looking for. And we did that and are now able to move forward and have the fee subsidy agreement with the county signed. So that's sort of what we're looking at tonight. They did come out and assess our program and all of our policies and procedures, and we're happy with what they had seen. So, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Amy. So, questions from members of council or comments? Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to Amy. Just a question about the fee subsidy. How many people do we have taken advantage of this, or do we project to be taking advantage of this based on the eligibility requirements?
So at this time, we currently don't have any families that do require this, but it is part of the agreement we have with the school board that we have this agreement with the county. We don't have families currently looking for it, but that doesn't mean in the future that we won't, and just being able to offer it is great.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Moving on to the next item then. Professional Development Days. We have here moved by Councillor Craven, second by Councillor Martin, that the Township of Mapleton Council receive for information Recreation Report 2021-07 dated November 9th, 2021 regarding the summer camp program and the after-school program. Back to Amy.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. We were really excited about all the positive feedback from our summer camp program this year, and we wanted to keep that going within the community. So we started right away looking at other options for non-instructional days for programming for the kids in our community. This past, I guess, Friday, we had our very first PD Day event at the PMD Arena. It was great. It was successful. We had a lot of kids come out and we were able to offer a little glimpse of some of the things that we offered during our camp program. So it was wonderful to have lots of kids come out, see what we offer during our camp day programs and experience all the different activities for themselves. In turn, we now have a full day PD Day camp coming up at the end of this month, as well as over the Christmas break. And those dates are almost full. And we feel this past week, we've had quite a few more enrollments, and we feel strongly that it was due to the success of our October 29th sort of activity day where the kids were able to come out and just experience what happens at camp in Mapleton.
Thank you, Amy. Councilor Douglas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering with the recent COVID cases at Drayton Heights, I understand from my kids that attendance is way down, especially in the younger grades. Just wondering if, there's a plan B in case it gets worse, or are people going to start bailing? Like, do we have a plan for that?
Amy?
Through your worship to Councillor Douglas. At this point, we're just ensuring that we are following all policies and procedures when it comes to COVID-19 and what the public health is looking for. We are in touch with them almost daily to ensure that what is happening at the school, that we are making sure that we are offering a safe program. We have been assured that what we are doing is correct and that public health is happy with the way that we are operating our programs. We do have a few ideas. If things need to go online or become remote, we'll definitely look at those options. But we want to really keep going with our programs as long as public health feels that they're safe and we can continue to offer them safely. We'd really like to see them to continue for the kids' mental health as well.
Thank you, Amy. Further questions, comments? Councilor Craven?
Through you, your worship, to Amy, I want to commend you on the job that you're doing, especially with this PDE thing. It's I think, been an important added on feature. Is there any chance that you could maybe move this or extend it to Moorfield and Drayton or to Alma?
Amy?
So through your worship to Councillor Craven, our PD days and camp program that are coming up in December and November are happening at the MCC in Moorfield. So that is exciting for that community. We are hoping to grow the after-school program if there's potential and want in the community. We can look at that for future. And we have a few ideas for summer camp this year that hopefully will be able to accommodate all of the communities.
Thank you, Amy. So that's Councilor Craven. So once we get through this year for the after-school program, it'll be reassessed to look at where we can further put that in other schools. We would have to go through the RFP process again with the school board to do that part. Further questions or comments? Then all those in favor? That's carried. Correspondence here for council's information, and I know that Councillor Ottens would like to support one. Councillor Ottens?
Yes, thank you. Item 12.4.